Well, the Nigeria Union of Local Government Employees has appealed to President Tinubu to intervene in an alleged abuse of powers by state governors. This, along with recent developments in local government administration in Ogun State, has rekindled a clamor for the enforcement of local government autonomy in Nigeria. Arise News correspondent Benga Ashuru has more on this.
Like a wild goose chase, the clamor for the enforcement of local government autonomy has failed to yield the much-needed results.
The last administration had tried by way of directing direct remittance from the federation account to the local governments. Yes, that has happened, but what happens? It is back-cycled. They are given directive from the state to actually recycle those funds.
The crucial role of the local government arm in bringing the impact of democratic governance to the grassroots can't be overstated. But like a persistent virus, the state governors had stood in the way of the local government access to funds, thereby making councils ineffective.
State governors engaged in the legal dissolution of elected council officials and appointment of caretaker committees or sole administrators. Repeatedly, the courts, particularly the Supreme Court, declare such conduct illegal.
After a brief respite from the long-drawn agitation between the local governments and state governments, recently, both parties got back to the trenches as the local government chairman of Ijebu East filed a petition to the anti-corruption agencies on account of diversion of funds against the Ogun State governor, prompting the National Union of Local Government Employees to appeal to President Tinubu for urgent intervention. If this trending social media video is anything to go by, it further adds credence to the compromised situation the local government chairmen have found themselves, a far cry from autonomy.
With time, the reforms that are happening at INEC in order to ensure that one man, one vote counts will also have some positive effect on the local government.
According to Section 162, subsection 6, each state shall maintain a special account to be called State Joint Local Government Account, into which shall be paid all allocations to the local government councils of the state from the federation account and from the government of the state.
I think what has happened is that the same local government functionaries which they put in place are still the same functionaries that they used to divide this fund from developmental purposes.
So what the governor then resorted to means to say we cannot appoint caretaker committees, we'll find a way out. They then resorted to manipulation of local government elections. Hence, in all the states of the federation, the ruling party in a state must win all the chairmanship and councillorship elections so that at the end of the month, nobody will question the governor.
While the law does not give powers to the state governors to touch the local government funds, the law, it appears, does not restrain the governors from doing so, as evident in the numerous cases of alleged diversion of local government funds by state governors. So the reality is that the local government chairmen go cap in hand to the state governors for funds from the joint accounts. The intervening force of the National Assembly has failed to change the system, as amending the laws requires 2/3 consenting votes of the state assemblies.
There is abuse of power in the running of that place, in the running of local government administration in Nigeria, particularly from the superintendents of state governments. They just need to be disciplined. There need to be a moral obligation on the part of state governors to allow development to thrive at the grassroots.
Likewise, the introduction of executive order by the Buhari administration to ensure funds meant for local governments are paid directly to them using the National Financial Intelligence Unit was struck out by the court.
In the legislative agendas, always have this issue of local government autonomy as a priority, area of legislative input. But sadly, for political reasons, the parliament most times meets, these challenges at the level of, the state's level.
As the dilemma persists, with local governments at the receiving end, leaving a yawning gap at the level of grassroots development, the way forward seems to appeal to the moral conscience of the governors as a restraint on the much alluring local government funds for the preservation of the nation's democracy and long search for good governance.
The London Paris Club refund for local governments, honored by state government, apart from Delta State, will have to be paid into the state, into the local governments. In some of the states, more than 5 billion was stolen. In some, over 2-3 billion was stolen. So those governors will have to account for the money. Secondly, Nigerians must insist that Section 7 of the Constitution and several decisions of our court on the autonomy of local government be respected. And finally, the Accountant General of the Federation must resume the monthly publication of the statutory allocations of the 3 tiers of government.
It is basically a moral issue now because the people at the grassroots are suffering. And when the government closest to them, which is the local government, is not functioning, then this is where we continue to have, issue of poor governance.
To cross this hurdle, all stakeholders and gatekeepers would need to consent to a constitutional amendment for local government autonomy and accountability to become a reality. Benga Ashiru, Arise News.
Well, thanks, Benga Ashiru. Well, for more on this, I'm joined in the studio by Professor Udenta Udenta. He's a political strategist and the founding National Secretary of the Alliance for Democracy. Good to see you and thanks for your time.
It's a pleasure, Sulaiman, to be with you.
Well, I really wish that the kind of smiles we have on our faces now will also, get to those people at the grassroots. But again, a lot of people will ask how we got here. Time was, I said to someone, for a lot of us, we recall the drama series Village Headmaster.
Yeah,
one of the most important casts there was Councillor Balogun, a grassroots personality. But somehow we have lost it, and there seemed to be a disappearance of grassroots governance in Nigeria today.
Yeah, so how do we unpack some of these issues? Part of what you've put out here and part of what was presented during the very long, media recap of the situation. My first take is that there is this tremendous over-reliance on the text of the Constitution as a guide to governance and impact of governance on the life
Over-reliance.
Yes, over-reliance. Britain has no written constitution, tradition, convention, norms, and so on, precepts from ancient times, and then parliamentary decisions over certain matters. Yet it's coherent and cohesive. They run their system. In 1970, shortly after the Civil War in East Central State, Ukwabiaseka, who didn't enjoy the massive support of the people because of this role they said they played in the Civil War, was the administrator. But for the 5 years before the coup d'etat of 75, that was the golden age of local government administration. What did this government do? Government did not, in a paternalistic manner, hand down to the people at the grassroots what development path they should pursue. What happened was that the local government authorities, we visit every autonomous community and said, how many kindreds do you have in this community? 30. Then you do proper election at the kindred level to elect a councillor. Then at the collegiate level, you elect a chairman of the council. My father was the chairman of the council. Then you decide what you want as development. Then you match it with local contribution. Then you take it to the local council and then you match what you have. So the government will decide that you want school, but you want hospital. Hospital goes. They may decide you want Corvette, but you want bridge, or you want market. So it is the grassroots-driven excess of development that mattered. And that transformed my community as well as other communities across the eastern region as the golden age. There was no constitution. There was no parliament. But there was governance that appealed to the people. Even the wife of the administrator, Chinyere Ukwabiaseka, started what she called Otuoluobodo, means community work. And women embraced it and empowered gender in the 70s. That's 50 odd years. Today we're still struggling with gender equality and so on and so forth. That's number one. That means the constitutional text is important, but there should be a fetishization of text of the Constitution. We should rather find ways where citizens-driven, empowered spaces can begin to weigh in at the local level, state level, and the federal level in order to get things done properly, and the Constitution specified. Finally, the experience of the Arab Spring has taught us, not just at the local government level. There were constitutions in those countries. They had parliaments. They were, in a sense, democratic in nature. But democracy doesn't derive legitimacy at the local, at the subnational, at the national level from constitutional text, from periodic elections. It derives from the conversation we are holding here. How far the governance model has impacted on the lives of the people. Finally, at the federal, it may not be as grave as the local government level. With the exception of the Saraki presidency, and the presidency that produced a moment of disruption when they went against the party decision to say we're going to become Senate President and Speaker, and not what the party decided. So we can have a parliament that is uniquely separate, independent, autonomously existing, but interconnected to the executive branch. The feature has been the same, just like you find in the States. Today you find the party and the government of the day at the presidential level dictate who becomes Senate President, who becomes Speaker. Even to the absurd level of the executive branch helping the parliament to choose chairman of committees. So when they choose chairman of committees and choose the Speaker and the Senate President, then the presidential, budgetary provision in terms of the text of the budget, which is actually a draft, becomes law. The parliament goes cap in hand. What do you want here? What do you want here? We protect everything, then add our own. So be it. What is the story? That's one aspect of it. So it's terrible at that level, maybe not as terrible at the level of the local government, but it's not always at the federal level. And an anecdote from Benue State is instructive here. It's like an urban legend, but there's some truth in this anecdote. Some village chiefs met the chairman of a local council and said, we know you receive two kinds of money every month. The money from Abuja, which doesn't belong to us. But the money you raise from us, taxes and rates and revenues from women, from farmers, from produce buyers, you must account for every penny of that money. But the one you get from Abuja, the so-called federal location, you go there and they give it to you, it's your own. So there's a disconnect in the mentality of the people from their own wealth. So the way they know is the wealth that comes from their pocket. The moment they embrace the totality of their wealth and decide that this local government chairman and his councillors must perform to the dictate of the people, things will improve.
Because the only time we hear politicians say or speak something close to the truth is when they say politics is local.
Every politics is local.
Good, and it is. A good thing you have actually taken us back to the 70s. You can imagine if the women were that organized from the grassroots at that time, 50 years ago,
yes, 50 years ago,
and counting. So at what point did we miss it?
Well, let me put it this way. In my own part of the world, which is the southeast, Igbo land, former Biafra, in 75 there was a coup d'etat that brought, Murtala Mohammed. Then there was a counter coup. There was a coup again, that aspiring coup from led by Dinka that took him down, and then Obasanjo became, the head of state. With that was introduction of course, local state governors in East Central State called Atumbera. Atumbera, what did he do? He with the Commissioner for Local Government, Odenigwe, brilliant political scientist, Professor Jean Odenigwe, and then Abakopa, that's the father of Abakopa and so on, sat down together and said there must be a new constituted authority structure in the local level, in the East. That means we're not allowed autonomous communities to be driven by development unions alone. Because development associations, in concert with the council, like I described earlier, were intersected to drive that golden age. The moment they decided that traditional rulers must be imported from somewhere, for every community, go and elect a chief. So chiefs were elected. And unfortunately, those Atambara chiefs never had successors, because there was no, ancestral grounding in terms of royalty. It's just if you have money and influence, you buy it. And when you die, some guys with some moral issues, drug and all manners of things with a lot of money came back home and seized the apparatus of governance at that level. That corrupted the democratic impulses you find in the development union and the town, and the community councils. 79 again constitutionalized in that fixed model of presidential system. Some of this understanding, I think almost like the acts and edicts from the military era, were all incorporated into the local, to the local administrative council of the Second Republic. That meant the dissolution of the councils, the weakening of the welfare unions to development unions, and then the larger-than-life role of the traditional authorities. Increasingly, with the local government chairman emerging, with the councillors, many were driven, with the politics of acquisition, politics of transmutation of their life, politics of social and political and economic mobility, and not politics of development, which was hanging on the people from 1970 to 1975, 76, and so on. Till today, it has become codified that the local government is now a theater of the absurd. You ask yourself, 24 years, odd years of so-called return to democratic rule, and people are fleeing the local authorities in their droves, in their millions. That means there is a petrogenetic pattern of development occurring before our very eyes. The cities are becoming larger than life, and then the bigger cities have become megalopolis. That means Abuja, which was constructed to maybe be an administrative capital, is now hosting not just the mainstream Abuja metropolitan center, but within the suburbs and the ghettos and all the area councils, possibly 7 to 10 million people.
So in other words, it will be right to say the local governments have been deliberately, made handicap not to...
It's a cash cow, an easy cash cow.
Because the thing here is that we've seen attempts. President Buhari did the same thing, and that's why this protest is also on by these council chairmen asking President Tinubu to also weigh in. At what point do you think, because now let's come back, you said over-reliance on the Constitution, but again, the Constitution seemed not to be what you have just said it is. A lot of people still think that we still have not been able to practice the separation as it should. That is why the states have been able to put some of these councils in their pockets.
The problem is that the kind of democratic, practice we inherited in 1999, and some of us are complicit. I was the national secretary of a major political party. They wanted three then, they said, we want to get the military off our back, in order to end, bring to closure the issue of the June 12th and now the election, and Abiola won it. And then Absalami had to have a short transition. Anything we inherited post Absalami Abubakar, was what it's for us. We didn't examine the text of the Constitution very well. We didn't know the consequences of what we embarked upon. We didn't know the contradictions embedded in this so-called presidential formulation of a constitutional text. We just inherited it.
But over 2 decades is enough. It's good enough time for us to come back and retreat.
The point is that the moment closure occurs, that means you elect people on the basis of the Constitution. Interest will not pervade the social and political space. You mentioned that in the narrative. For you to secure the 2/3 support of the state assemblies, the last absurd one occurred in Imo State, if I'm not mistaken. There's the amendment at the federal level, at the National Assembly, to say, we want to give you autonomy. State legislatures are voting against autonomy for themselves because they're watching the behavior of the governors. Most governors have medievalized power, what they call the medievalization of power at the state level. That means you don't have any tissues of democratic governance. You don't have checks and balances. You don't have people pushing back on authoritarian and liberal mindset of most of these mobile level, these organizers of power at the subnational level. Not all the governors, but some. So when state assembly members vote against their own interests, against local government autonomy, against autonomy of the state assembly, then something is wrong with the system, the way it is constituted.
Then why do you think that? It looks, sorry to cut you, it looks like it is because they're not actually the people's representatives.
It's not even the question of people's representatives. It's actually the mindset of the people who send them forth to represent them. When you decide that those people sent forth are not servants of the people, but lords to the people, when you believe that poverty is haunting the land and people are disempowered and completely disillusioned, so anything that drops from the councillors and the chairmen and the state assembly members and so on there could be a matter of life and death for them. That means, how am I going to push back against a councillor who is dropping little things for me every now and then? I come to his house or her house, and then somebody to change enter my pocket. I cannot be in that strong, empowered position to push back on seeing a guy who never had a home suddenly is building a mansion, who never had a bicycle now has 2 or 3 cars. The money to purchase all these appurtenances of democratic governance are the money belonging to the people. So my take is that the model of democracy we have, there must have to be a disruptive moment in which you have to investigate and interrogate it. The presidential system may be something that has endured for 24 years, but why are our scholars silent about it? What are intellectuals? Why have they abdicated the responsibility of thinking for the nation? When they abdicate thought to the political class alone, that class is mindful of its interest and how to protect that interest.
But again, there seems to be, a continuation of the old, corrupt order, irrespective of generation, and that is why we really need to interrogate and find out what exactly is wrong. Time was when people would have thought that is related to a particular generation or particular order. For instance, you talk about the First Republic, you talk about Second Republic, all the republics. But today we have younger persons, younger Nigerians that have even done worse things than what we saw in times past. So there must be something about the kind of culture that we have, imbibed over the years to making us think that grassroots governance isn't what it should be.
Beyond culture, there is a new thesis I've been pursuing for the past 1 year. I call it a sense of ritual escalation, which means the maladies that afflict the nation and the kind of therapeutics required to address those maladies. In Achebe's Hour of God, where I took my bearing from that ritual moment to say, every community will suffer diseases, but you look for the animal whose blood will match the potency of that disease. That's why in ritual ceremonies, you find a fowl, you kill it, or a ram, or a bull. In ancient past, they can even kill a human. It is how do you locate the problem and how do you find a particular solution? That's what we're missing in this democracy. A lot of people have the mindset that we fought the military. People like us suffered detention 5-6 times, some went into exile. So we fought the military in this particular format. So when the new government is in place and it is not liberal in nature, but it is a civilian government, we must fight it using the same tools. So fighting the civilian regime with the tools against the military will not work. That's why it is not working. Every time there's this pattern and it is very clear and it's very, very obvious what steps to take. We have to become more adaptive in the way and manner we struggle to fight or push back against the orders of the day. For example, civic unions and the CBOs, community-based organizations, youth colleges at the local level must find a way to task the legislators, but the councillors, state assembly members, members of the federal parliament, they have constituency offices. They have the way to raise the banner of struggle at that level to say, we sent you to Abuja, we sent you to Enugu, we sent you to Port Harcourt, we sent you to the state capital to do this for us. The councillor, you live among our within us in kindred. If you don't do what we expect, we ostracize you. We set you apart from the rest of the people because you're not doing what they want us to do. Everybody's looking at Abuja, the power center of the federation where the money resides. So you forget the state and the local government. So the people, they are sitting pretty and empowering themselves at the expense of the people. So the people must focus back at home. That's why I said that the logic of intervention and struggle must escape that mindset of fighting the military with a particular model of struggle to a new adaptive, more creative model that disrupts the ability of the political class to keep on pushing the people down.
How hopeful are you that this just might be reversed, or we might get it right?
We could get it right when, apart from, as I said, Overreliance on the constitutional text, it's a great problem. You talk about moral passion, you talk about the authority, moral authority that comes with leaders. You talk about, people, who occupy or inhabit empowered civic spaces through training, through education, through deep knowledge, through interconnectivity, and through struggle. They could basically say, enough is enough. We're going to use pamphlet, leafleting, spreading the message, talking to people, raising awareness about what you're doing. It is risky, it is cumbersome, but democratic struggle is not a day struggle. It's a struggle of a lifetime.
Now that reminds me, you just spoke about a book you wrote, and you're talking about pamphlets. You turn 60 soon, and we understand that you also have about 21 books so far.
There are 21 books. Now I can break them down for you. I'm going to turn 60 on 5th September, next Tuesday. And these 21 books will be delivered that day in one location in Abuja at NAV Conference Center in Kado. Now, these books deal with philosophy, aesthetics, politics, literature, peace, conflict resolution. It deals with creative literature, poems, novels, short stories, all tissues of life and existence that appeal to me from the time I was a little boy to the stage in which today I'm going to turn 60. So it is an offering for Nigerian people. It is not just my own personal creation. I believe that a scholar and intellectual has a duty to spread knowledge and for people to participate in that art of sharing that knowledge. Again, it's going to be a conference on how to make Nigeria work. That means I'm not celebrating anything there to please myself or empower my soul with food or drinks, but how do you offer to the people of this country opportunity to penetrate your mind and see whether that mind can intersect between what we call intellection and praxis, the intellectual production of a scholar, and the practical involvement in the social, political, cultural, and ideological struggles of the day. That I defined my life in the past 30, 40 years. So the combination of that struggle to balance, intellect and balance it with struggle and practice is what led to these 21 books that culminate in the celebration of my 60th birthday.
A while ago you mentioned Arrow of God. And we'll still talk about these great giants. And here you are. Yes, great giants. How much of learning, have we been able to get from some of these texts that have helped our growth as a people?
The problem is that people, and I'm happy this culture didn't even start from here. In the past, Things Fall Apart wasn't studied as a literature text, as a sociological text. In European and American universities, go and investigate. So they believe that his acuteness of imagination was so coherent and legitimate that you can use a creative fiction to study the culture of a people, their mode of governance, their rituals, the art of their belief system, their cosmology. So this part disrupted a whole lot of things. It disrupted the way aesthetic productions occur.
I want us to talk about that, the aesthetics, the revolution.
Okay, this one is Rebels in Youthhood, and then Youthhood Scribblings.
No, there was one before this.
Okay,
if we can
this I wrote when I was 13 years.
While you were 13?
6 of the volumes were written between 13 and 14 years. There are 17 texts I did then. So this is aesthetics.
Revolutionary aesthetics.
This is actually domestication of Marxist aesthetic philosophy into the Nigerian, African, cultural and aesthetic space. What did I do? I said, the main driver of African literary and cultural development, and by extension political evolution, has to be contestation between imperialism and between African resurgence. That means Pan-Africanist origin for decolonization, now we call decoloniality, can only occur when we mobilize the agency of Marxist dialectics in helping us to come out of this.
Can we link that to grassroots governance and what's happening in Gabon and Niger?
The way I can link it up there is that the model I chose is a model in which democratization is not just a rhetorical device, or there is a constitution, or we have a parliament, there is a president sitting in office, there is a governor. No, democracy must emanate from the people. That's why I find the art, ideology, and social commitment in African poetry. To be committed in poetry, for example, is to show capacity to understand the needs of the society, the viewpoints of the people, the way and manner they expect reality to impinge on them, the way and manner they expect society to react to them. So the poet is the poet of the people. He's like a recanter, he's like a groy. So society can only grow when the mass of the people participate in the drama of creative productions. So literature, the kind of literary things I investigate is to how do you use these productions to mobilize the soul of the people? How do you use it to create agencies of resistance, of counter-hegemonies? How do you use it to mobilize the people that the government of the day, left on their own, will not do what you want them to do for you? You must take the government almost at the other, while you are the other self. You must therefore pursue government and governance to extract from the government as much as possible that the docility and quietude will never secure for you expectations in life. This literature empowers your soul and gives you the sense of ideological clarity and direction that you must build communities, interconnect among yourself and say, Mr. Governor, Mrs. Governor, Mr. Local Government Chairman, we the people know why we put you there, and we can hold you accountable. Radical literature helps you in doing that. Cultural production that explore the space of the people in contestation against authorities will help you to achieve it. That's my passion at that level. There are some other words of mine dealing with peace building. Nigerian peace and security architecture is not skewed to solve any meaningful problem. It's a post-war device to hold the nation. That means law and order is a key element in that architecture. Today, people urge for human infrastructure, human security development. If you don't build up education, if you don't build up health services, if you don't public works, if you don't empower people, today we are gripped by new threats. Boko Haram terrorism, banditry, disruptions across the country, pipeline vandalization, and possible collapse of democratic governance in the post-colonies of West Africa and Central Africa. These are all consequences of not being alert to the needs of society. So governance is where you secure legitimacy, not through constitutional text. You have constitutional text and election periodically done, but without impacting on the life of the people, you lose legitimacy. And when you lose it, people can become urging. They can urge themselves to seek for self-help. Sometimes that self-help undermines democratic governance, as you find in Burkina Faso, you find in Mali, you find in Niger, Gabon recently. It's a sign and a signal, not to win the big stick alone,
Yeah.
But to ask the question, leaders are asking, P2B, Atiku, and the rest of them are asking these questions. What has gone wrong with governance in Africa? Some of these works I've done can help you to clarify the answer to that problem.
Because we all certainly need an answer to that. I'd like to thank you for your time, and I do hope that we'll have more conversations. 21 books at 60, all from Professor Udenta Udenta. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
And happy birthday.
Thank you.